I raised her like my own. Then one day my bank account was wiped clean, my lakeside house sold, and the seller's name was my granddaughter. But the worst part, that was just the beginning. If you think this is just another ordinary family story, you're dead wrong. Subscribe now to catch the next jaw-dropping stories we bring to life. Eleanor Barnes had stopped expecting surprises a long time ago. At 74, she had learned that life after loss was rarely loud. It didn't announce itself with thunder or great tremors, it simply thinned out. Conversations faded, people stopped calling, rooms grew quieter. And when the world didn't quite know what to do with you anymore, it left you alone in silence. Her house, a weathered cedar-framed relic tucked into a forgotten pocket of rural Wisconsin, matched her perfectly. It creaked in the same places every winter. The screen door sagged on its hinges. The garden out front hadn't seen a new bloom in years, and neither had she. 15 years had passed since Gerald died. 15 years since the Army-issued letter came confirming what the knock on the door had already told her. He saved the other men, they'd said. There wasn't time for him to make it out. She'd nodded. She hadn't cried, not then. The tears came later, quieter. Gerald had been everything her husband, her war hero, the only man who knew how to fix the fuse box and make cornbread that didn't taste like sandpaper. When he died, the silence took his place. It filled the house. It followed her down the hallway and settled in beside her at night. She lived alone now, but not completely. There was Lily. Lily was her niece by blood, but granddaughter in spirit. Eleanor had helped raise her when Lily's mother, her sister's only daughter, got lost in the kind of sadness pills couldn't fix. Now Lily was 27, smart as a whip, and working as a freelance software developer in Milwaukee. She wore black-rimmed glasses and spoke in abbreviations Eleanor had stopped trying to decode. They spoke every few days, FaceTime mostly. Lily would call while half-cooking some plant-based mystery meal in her city kitchen, and Eleanor would listen patiently from her rocking chair, nodding even when she didn't understand a thing. She missed people, but not enough to move. She missed Gerald, but not enough to leave the house where every corner held him. That morning, spring sunlight angled through the dusty window panes like a spotlight. Eleanor pushed the mop across the living room floor, humming an off-key version of Danny Boy. The kind of cleaning she did that day wasn't for guests. It was for ghosts. The rug under the coffee table had always been lumpy on the left side. Gerald had hated it. Trip hazard, he used to mutter. She'd rolled her eyes at the time, called him an old soldier with phantom enemies in the furniture. But today, something was different. The lump had shifted. Her mop caught on it. She frowned, bent down, and slid the rug aside. There, where the faded wood planks met the dust-lined edge of the sofa, a single thread stuck out from the floor. No, not the floor. The rug. She tilted her head. It wasn't loose carpet fiber. It was something stitched poorly, crudely, like someone with shaking hands had tried to sew it shut in a hurry. Eleanor pulled at the thread. It gave way with a soft tear, and a small square pocket barely larger than her palm opened in the rug's lining. She reached inside. Her fingers touched paper, thick, dry, folded. She drew it out slowly, heart climbing into her throat for no reason she could name. The paper was yellowed, brittle along the edges, and smelled like a locked drawer in a forgotten attic. Unfolding it revealed a crude diagram lines drawn in black ink dots and dashes skirting the margins. There were labels she didn't recognize, 71D South marker, and scrawled across the bottom in handwriting she knew like her own. Bury this where no one would ever look. L. Trust only who you raised. G for Gerald. Her knees buckled into a soft sit. She stared at the message for a long time, her mind suddenly crackling to life like a dusty radio dial being turned. She knew this script. She knew this kind of map. And she knew Morse code. Gerald had taught her during the summer of '69, just after they'd married back when he was preparing to ship out. If I ever need to tell you something and can't say it out loud, he'd said, I'll tap it out for you. Dots and dashes. Letters out of silence. She laid the paper flat on the coffee table and squinted. The dots and dashes were tiny, stamped in straight lines beside the landmarks on the map. At the bottom it read, She reached into the bookshelf drawer where she kept an old Army-issued Morse code pocket guide. She hadn't used it in years, but like Gerald's sweaters and the Army medals he'd never displayed, she couldn't throw it out. It took her 20 minutes to decode the message. When she finished, she leaned back in the chair, her hands suddenly cold. The message read, "The truth is beneath the broken oak. Marker 71D, protect the ledger." Ledger. She stared at the phrase. Gerald hadn't believed in banks. He'd cashed his military checks and stashed them around the house in soup cans and envelopes, but he'd never mentioned a ledger. And the broken oak, she knew that tree. They used to fish near it when they were young before the woods thinned out and the developers came in. It had fallen during a thunderstorm, cracked in half like lightning had reached inside and torn its ribs out. Nobody went near it anymore. It was all overgrown now, forgotten. She touched the edge of the paper again. Her hands were shaking not from fear, but from the weight of what she didn't understand yet. Something was buried, something Gerald had hidden, and he'd trusted only her to find it. Only her? No. The note said, "Trust only who you raised." She exhaled. Lily. There was no one else. She pressed her lips into a firm line, reached for her flip phone, and dialed. 3 rings. Then the familiar voice, casual, distracted. "Hey, Gran, what's up?" "Lily," she said, voice steady. "I need you to come visit this weekend. There's something I need your help with." A beat. "Everything okay?" "Yes," Eleanor said and meant it. "No," she added and meant that too. "I just found something. Something your grandfather left behind." There was a pause on the other end. Then Lily's voice again, more focused now. "I'll be there Friday night." Eleanor hung up. She looked again at the map, at the dots and dashes and the looping curl of Gerald's handwriting. There was something more here, something he'd never told her, maybe never had the chance to. And whatever it was, it had waited 15 years. Now it was calling, and she had just answered. Lily arrived just before sunset on Friday. Her little gray Prius pulled up to the gravel path with a soft crunch, and Eleanor was already waiting on the porch, arms folded, her cardigan drawn tight, despite the warmth of early spring. The girl stepped out with a travel bag slung over one shoulder and a laptop case in the other, earbuds still dangling from her ears. "Hey, Gran." She smiled, her voice bright as ever. "This place looks exactly the same." Eleanor nodded. "Hasn't had much reason to change." Inside the house smelled like lemon polish and something older, something time forgot. Lily dropped her things by the door, slipped off her shoes, and walked straight to the kitchen like she always had as a child. "I brought you gluten-free banana bread," she announced, rummaging in her bag. "You probably won't like it, but my diet's your diet for the weekend." Eleanor didn't laugh. Instead, she reached for the folded paper on the dining table, the map, and slid it across the polished wood toward Lily. "I found this, under the living room rug, sewn into it." Lily blinked. Then quietly she sat down. Her eyes scanned the lines, the Morse code symbols, and the scrawl of Gerald's familiar handwriting. She read the message once, then again. "The truth is beneath the broken oak. Marker 71D, protect the ledger," she read aloud. "What the hell does that mean?" Eleanor didn't flinch at the language. "I think he hid something important, and I think you're the only person I can trust to help me figure it out." Lily looked up slowly. Her glasses had slid halfway down her nose, and her expression was unreadable. "I thought you said Grandpa wasn't the secret-keeping type." "He wasn't," Eleanor said. "But war changes men, and he always had that one drawer I couldn't open." For a long moment, neither of them said anything. Then Lily pulled out her laptop. She opened a decoding software, clicked into a Morse translator, and re-entered the code Eleanor had already deciphered by hand. The same message appeared again. "Okay," Lily said. "Let's figure out where the hell 71D is." She tapped furiously, pulling up satellite maps and old zoning documents, murmuring to herself, as if the machine were a co-pilot in some digital expedition. Eleanor watched, only understanding fragments, parcel numbers, GIS overlays, latitude and longitude, but the urgency in Lily's voice reassured her. The girl wasn't treating this like a game. She was serious, invested. After an hour, Lily leaned back with a low whistle. "Found it," she said, spinning the screen toward Eleanor. "Marker 71D is part of an undeveloped parcel just outside Oak Ridge Trail. Says it was military land until the 80s, then privately acquired by... Wait, she squinted. Gerald W. Barnes, your husband bought this land in 1992 under a shell company. Eleanor's brow furrowed. He never told me. Because the purchase was never fully registered in your name. It's sitting dormant in the system, but technically still his. No activity, no taxes, no sale, just there. And the oak? There's a giant tree here. Lily pointed at the satellite image. It looks like it's been dead for years. You think he buried something? I don't know, Eleanor said. But if we don't go, we'll never know. They packed a flashlight, gloves, and a small shovel. Lily brought a portable charger and digital scanner just in case we hit something weird, she said. Eleanor brought a thermos of strong coffee and the map folded neatly in her coat pocket. The sky had gone from gold to bruised gray by the time they reached Oak Ridge Trail. Eleanor drove her old Ford pickup while Lily navigated, guiding them down winding roads, choked by overgrowth and memory. The woods opened suddenly at a clearing, and there it was, the oak. It lay shattered, its trunk twisted like a snapped bone limbs, sprawling like the skeleton of some long-dead giant. Eleanor stepped out of the truck and stood still for a moment. She could almost hear Gerald's laughter echoing through the trees as he pulled a sunfish from the nearby stream. He'd loved this place, loved it enough to hide something here. Lily opened the trunk and handed Eleanor a pair of gloves. Let's find your treasure, Gran. They dug in silence. First soft brush strokes, then deeper, more purposeful thrusts of the shovel. The dirt was cold and loose, littered with broken roots. Just when Eleanor's back began to ache, Lily's shovel hit something solid. A thud, then another. Lily dropped to her knees and scraped at the edges with her hands. A metal box slowly emerged, caked in mud. It was army green, scratched and dented, but sealed. Lily looked up. It's locked. Eleanor stepped forward and reached into the pocket of her coat. From it, she pulled out Gerald's old dog tags, which she'd kept on her keychain since the day he died. She examined the small tag chain. There, near the clasp, was a key. She'd never noticed it before. The box clicked open with the sound of finality. Inside was a black leather-bound ledger wrapped in plastic, a single yellow envelope, and a smaller metal tin. Lily opened the envelope first. There were documents inside: a deed to the land, a power of attorney signed in 1992, and a single-page letter in Gerald's handwriting. To my Eleanor, if you're reading this, then I didn't get the chance to explain. This land and what's in this box is yours. Use it if you need it. I made choices after the war that I couldn't always share, but I never stopped protecting you. Trust who you raised. Love, G. The ledger, when opened, revealed columns and columns of entries: military-sourced pay savings bonds, uncashed pensions, anonymous transfers. Tucked in the back was a folded statement from a private banking firm in New York City. Lily gasped. It's still active, she said. This isn't just land. He kept a shadow account. Grandpa was sitting on more than just retirement money. She pulled up her phone, logged into the bank's online portal using the information inside the envelope. $683,000. The number blinked on the screen like something out of fiction. Eleanor sat down hard on a tree stump, her breath catching. She had lived for 15 years rationing groceries, patching socks, and skipping her own prescriptions when the money didn't stretch far enough. And all this time, Gerald had left her a hidden fortune. I don't understand, she whispered. Why didn't he tell me? Lily didn't answer right away. Finally, she said, maybe he thought you wouldn't want it. Or maybe he knew it wouldn't be safe in the open. Eleanor looked at her. Safe from who? But Lily had already moved on to the next question. Her eyes were bright with ideas. We can bring this home, scan it all. I can get the funds transferred, set up a new account under your name. We'll need a lawyer, but I know someone. If we do it right, you'll be able to live comfortably. Finally. Eleanor was still staring at the screen. I don't even know what I'd do with money like that. Lily gave a soft laugh. That's why I'm here. I'll help you manage it. Quietly. We don't need to make a big deal out of it. Let's not tell anyone just yet. I'll set everything up securely. Trust me. Eleanor said nothing. She looked down at the metal box. At the key still dangling from Gerald's dog tags. At the words written in his careful hand. Trust who you raised. She wanted to believe. And at that moment, under the shadow of the broken oak, the air still thick with memory, she did. A week passed. Eleanor kept the green metal box under her bed tucked into a quilted bag she'd sewn herself. She hadn't told anyone, not the neighbors, not the postman, not even her friend Alice from book club, who was known to treat gossip like communion. She tried to act normal. She still made tea at 5 a.m., still watered the spider plant on the windowsill even though it had clearly given up months ago. But every time the floor creaked, she glanced toward her bedroom, and every time the mail arrived, she felt her stomach tighten. There was something unnatural about having so much money and not being allowed to feel like it was yours. Lily had returned to Milwaukee after spending 2 more nights helping Eleanor scan documents, set up a private email, and link the ledger data to a secure digital folder. She'd promised to start the process of transferring the assets safely and discreetly. "It's complicated, Gran," she had said. "If we move too fast, it could raise red flags. There's paperwork, IRS history, inheritance tax. I just want to protect you." Eleanor believed her. She always had, until Friday. She'd walked into the grocery store and tried to pay for her weekly Staples milk rice, a box of her favorite Earl Grey, with the debit card Lily had helped her set up. Declined. She tried again. Declined. The cashier, a young boy with sleepy eyes and a nose ring, offered a nervous smile. "Maybe it's the chip you can try inserting again." She did. Again. Declined. Flushed, Eleanor fished out a $20 bill from her coat and paid in cash. As she pushed her cart out, the sliding doors whined, slapping her face. A strange cold settled into her bones. She walked home instead of calling the taxi like she usually did. It gave her time to think. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe the bank was doing some verification. Or maybe... No, she wasn't going to spiral. At home, she tried to log into the online banking portal Lily had helped her create. Invalid username or password. She tried the backup code written on the notepad. Account not found. She checked her email. The security folder Lily had created was gone. At first, Eleanor thought she was making a mistake. Maybe she'd typed something wrong. Maybe her internet was acting up again. She restarted the modem. She closed the laptop. She made tea, then opened everything again. Same result. Something was wrong. On Sunday, she received a letter in the mail. It was from a real estate firm in Madison, the kind that sent junk offers for land buyouts and tax lien services. But this one was different. Her name was at the top. So was the address of the Lake House parcel 71D, and in bold letters, confirmation of listing. Your property at 71D Oak Ridge Trail is now officially listed on the MLS. Estimated value, $265,000. Eleanor dropped the letter. Her knees hit the linoleum. It didn't make sense. The land wasn't for sale. It had never been for sale. She hadn't told anyone other than Lily about it. She dialed the number listed at the bottom of the page. A cheery woman named Gwen answered. "Oh, hello, Mrs. Barnes. Yes, we've had a few inquiries already. The lake view is just lovely. Congratulations on the listing." "I never listed it," Eleanor said, her voice low. Gwen paused. Well, your signature's on the paperwork. We received it via email last Thursday." "Email?" "Yes. From your legal representative, Lily S. Barnes. She submitted your digital signature and supporting documents. It all looks quite official." Eleanor's head spun. "Can you send me a copy?" she asked. "Of course, ma'am. Sending it to the email on file now." Eleanor hung up, opened her laptop, and checked her inbox. Nothing. She tried typing her old password again. Still locked out. She stared at the screen for a long time, her heart pounding like it had when she was 16, and Gerald had asked her to dance at the county fair. Only this time it wasn't butterflies. It was dread. That night she couldn't sleep. At 3 a.m. she got up and went to the closet where she kept her birth certificate, Gerald's army papers, and the deed to her own house. Everything was in a locked metal box stored behind the linen shelves. She turned the key, opened the lid, and stopped breathing. The envelope where she'd stored her Social Security card was gone. So was the power of attorney she'd had drawn up after Gerald died. Gone, too, was the handwritten will Gerald had written before his final deployment, the one stating that any future asset would pass solely to her. She scrambled through the folders, heart racing, pulling out papers and tossing them to the floor. Receipts from 1989, bank statements from a credit union that no longer existed, but not the documents that mattered. Someone had been in here. Recently. She backed away, holding the edge of the dresser for balance. Her first instinct was to call Lily, but she didn't. Instead, she got dressed, threw on her wool coat, and walked to the town attorney's office the next morning. It was only 6 blocks away, and she didn't trust herself to drive with her hands shaking like they were. Carl Wetzel had been her attorney for 30 years. He'd helped her draft Gerald's death certificate paperwork, file property taxes, and even update her will. When she entered his office, Carl looked up from his coffee and frowned. "Eleanor, everything all right? I need you to look something up for me," she said. "I want to know if I've signed anything recently, anything involving land or power of attorney." Carl tapped his keyboard. A few minutes later, he looked up. "Well," he said, adjusting his glasses, "it says here you signed a limited durable power of attorney 3 days ago, granting full control of the lake property plus financial access to all related assets." Eleanor's mouth went dry. "Signed where?" "Digitally. It was filed through DocuSign. The IP address was traced to Milwaukee." "Who's listed as the recipient?" Carl turned the screen toward her. "Lily S. Barnes." Carl leaned back confused. "She's your granddaughter, isn't she?" Eleanor couldn't answer. Her chest felt tight. Her palms were wet. Her body was reacting before her mind could catch up. "I never signed that," she said finally. "Then we've got a problem." Carl closed the folder. "You need to get ahead of this. If that signature holds up, she can liquidate everything." Eleanor nodded slowly. Her mind reeled back to the tiny voice in her ear. "Trust who you raised." Had she raised Lily? Not really, not all the way. Not enough to know what she was capable of when money got involved. By the time she left Carl's office, the world felt different. The sidewalks looked sharper, the shadows deeper. When she got home, she unlocked the front door and walked straight to her living room. The framed wedding photo of her and Gerald, usually perched beside the old lamp, was gone. She turned in a slow circle. The worn clock on the mantel gone. Her quilt basket gone. The books were rearranged. The carpet had been vacuumed, but not by her. There was a faint smell of citrus, not her brand. Someone had been inside her house, not just rummaging, rearranging, like they lived there, like they already believed it was theirs. She sank into the sofa and stared at the empty space where Gerald's photo used to be. Then she whispered to the silence, "What have you done, Lily?" And for the first time in years, the silence whispered back. The next time Eleanor saw Lily was 3 days later. She stood in the doorway like a stranger, dressed in a crisp black coat Eleanor had never seen before. Her hair was slicked back in a ponytail that made her look older, sharper somehow, and her smile was too quick, too practiced. "Gran," she called cheerfully, stepping inside like nothing had happened. "I brought you some of those organic crackers you like. I figured you were low." Eleanor didn't move. She simply stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, staring at the girl she had once trusted more than anyone. "Sit," she said. Lily blinked. "What?" "Sit down, Lily." The cheer drained from Lily's face as she took a slow seat at the edge of the armchair, the bag of crackers still in her lap. Eleanor's voice didn't rise. It was quiet, low, and slicing. "Why is my bank account locked?" Lily looked at her wide-eyed. "What?" "My debit card was declined. I tried to log in and the system says my account doesn't exist. You said you'd handle the transfer discreetly, but I can't even check my balance." Lily shifted. "Oh, that. Yeah, I've been meaning to tell you. There was some kind of issue with the verification process. Banks get weird with old paper trails. Something about outdated identification, I think. I called the bank and they said they're reviewing the activity." Eleanor narrowed her eyes. "And the deed to the lake house?" Lily hesitated. "What about it?" "It's been listed for sale, with your name as my legal representative." Lily laughed, but it was hollow. "Grand real estate companies send out junk mail all the time. That doesn't mean anything. I spoke to the firm. I saw the documents. I saw my own forged signature." Silence. Lily didn't answer. She just sat there blinking too fast, lips parting like she wanted to protest but didn't. Eleanor's voice grew sharper. "You also removed documents from my safe. My social security card, Gerald's will, the power of attorney we filed with Carl. You've been inside my closet." "That's ridiculous," Lily started. Eleanor stepped forward. "Don't lie to me, not now." For a second, Eleanor saw something flicker across Lily's face, something feral, uncertain. Then it vanished, and the performance resumed. "I'm trying to help you," Lily said, the words more forceful now. "You think I'd go through all this effort just to steal from you? Come on, your family. I'm doing this so everything's protected, legally, so you don't get crushed by taxes or penalized for something Grandpa didn't declare. You mean the money he hid in a metal box under a tree for 15 years? Lily stiffened. You're lying, Eleanor said quietly. I don't know how far it goes yet, but I know you're not doing this alone. Lily stood. Gran, I think you're tired. Maybe this is too much too fast. I should go. Eleanor didn't try to stop her. She let her walk out the door with that sleek black coat and too tight smile, but she watched, closely, carefully, like a hunter watching the brush for movement. That night she stayed up. She sat in her old rocking chair, the one Gerald had carved initials into on their 3rd anniversary. She drank weak chamomile tea and waited for Lily's voice to carry through the walls again. It came at 2:17 a.m. She wasn't on a video call this time. It was a phone call, low, fast, agitated. Eleanor tiptoed to the hallway, pressing herself against the wall near the guest room, her heart thudding in her chest. No, I'm not rushing it. I'm doing it exactly the way you said. Silence. I already submitted the second transfer. She hasn't caught on yet. I just need a few more days. A pause, then firmer. Don't worry, I'm not stupid. I used her IP address for the signing. If it blows up, she'll look like the one who authorized everything. Eleanor felt her breath catch. Then Lily's voice again, trembling but sharp. I'm telling you I did everything like you told me, Walter. Walter. The name sliced through the dark like a blade. Eleanor backed away from the door, her hand gripping the wall to keep herself upright. The room tilted. Her knees gave slightly. Walter wasn't just a neighbor. He was Gerald's oldest friend, his wartime brother. The man who'd helped her fix the front gate last fall and brought over blackberry jam every July like clockwork. The one who'd cried at Gerald's funeral and held her hand with trembling fingers. Walter. She almost laughed. Of course he was behind this. Who else would know about the lake house? About Gerald's secrecy? About the codes? About Eleanor's blind spot for the people she loved? The betrayal settled in her bones. It burned there, heavy and slow. She didn't sleep. At 7:00 a.m. sharp, she picked up the landline and called his house. He answered on the second ring. Eleanor. I need to see you, she said, her voice flat. He hesitated. Is everything all right? No, she said. Come tonight, please. A pause, then softer. All right. That evening he arrived, as he always did, smiling gently, a tin of lemon bars in hand. He didn't know she'd heard. He didn't know the look in her eyes had changed. I made these for you, he said. Been a while since we talked. I figured you could use something sweet. Eleanor stepped aside to let him in. They sat in the kitchen as they always had. Her teapot whistled softly behind them. She didn't touch the lemon bars. Walter cleared his throat. So, what's troubling you? She looked him in the eye. Gerald left me something. A box, with documents, a ledger. Something in Walter's jaw tensed, but he kept his expression still. He hid it beneath a tree in Oak Ridge Trail. Walter nodded slowly. That sounds like Gerald. I never knew he had that kind of money. He smiled faintly. He was always saving, always worrying. I wonder who he thought he needed to protect it from. Another pause. Walter leaned back in his chair, folded his hands together. The world's not always kind to people like Gerald. He probably didn't trust the system. He didn't want you caught in it if something happened. Eleanor stared at him. He trusted you, though. Walter met her gaze, unreadable. Didn't he? Walter didn't respond. Then finally he spoke. He left me something, too. Eleanor's brow furrowed. What? Walter reached into the inside pocket of his flannel jacket and pulled out a small cassette tape worn dusty, labeled with shaky handwriting. For Eleanor, only if she's in danger. Her breath caught. He gave this to me the week before his final deployment, Walter said. Said I'd know when it was time to hand it over. I never understood what he meant, but lately, I think maybe I do. He slid the tape across the table. Eleanor stared at it. The room held still. He asked me to keep it safe, Walter said softly. He didn't trust anyone else. Eleanor picked it up slowly, her fingers trembling. Her voice was quiet. Why now? Walter didn't answer. He simply stood. I'll leave you to it, he said. When you're ready, you'll understand. She watched him leave, watched the door close behind him. Then she walked to the back room, pulled out the old cassette player she hadn't used since the early 2000s, and popped the tape inside. She pressed play. Static. Then, Ellie. Her knees gave out. It was his voice, Gerald's voice, a little fainter than she remembered, a little raspier. But him. If you're hearing this, then something's happened. I didn't want this for you. I wanted to be there to explain. But if I'm gone and if Walter's given you this, then you're in trouble." She covered her mouth. "I didn't tell you everything. Couldn't. Not after the war. There were things. I signed papers. I got involved with some bad folks who wore good suits. I thought I could fix it. I buried it instead." Pause, a breath. "Walter knows more than he says. Maybe he helps you. Maybe he doesn't. I don't know what path he chose. But Ellie, if someone's after that money, if someone's using Lily, then you have to be careful." Another pause, a strain in his voice. "I didn't leave the money for survival. I left it for freedom. Don't let them use it to trap you." The tape clicked. Silence. Eleanor stared at the recorder, her hands white-knuckled on the edge of the table. And in that moment she understood. Lily wasn't the mastermind. She was the pawn. And the game had just begun. The cassette ended with a click that sounded like the door of a coffin shutting. Eleanor sat still for several minutes, her fingers resting on the edges of the cassette player, her breathing shallow. Gerald's voice had always held a quiet strength, but in that recording it carried something else, something she couldn't stop hearing even after the tape had gone silent. Fear. "Walter knows more than he says." It echoed over and over in her mind like a dripping faucet. She had trusted Walter, baked for him, laughed with him. She had mourned beside him. And now Gerald, her Gerald from beyond the grave, had told her plainly, "Don't." She rewound the tape slowly, hit play again. "If Walter's given you this, then you're in trouble." The words rang out with more weight the second time. "He used my name in a land deal back in '85, said it was temporary, said the army would never trace it. Turned out the whole thing was a scam. He took the profits. I took the fall." Eleanor clutched the table edge. She remembered that year Gerald had come home from deployment distant and angry. They fought more. He drank more. She never understood why. If he's circling now, he's not here for friendship, Elle. He's here to clean up loose ends. Loose ends. She stared at the player as if it had just turned into a loaded weapon. Walter had been in her house. He had stood in her kitchen, he had handed her lemon bars, and he had probably known what was inside the green metal box long before she ever laid eyes on it. Her hand trembled as she turned off the machine. So Lily wasn't the brain behind this. She didn't know what was worse, being betrayed by someone she loved, or realizing that same person had been manipulated by someone she had trusted even longer. "Trust who you raised," Gerald had said. But what if what she raised had been used like a pawn? Eleanor stood the chair legs scraping sharply against the tile. Her mind buzzed with pieces. Fragments: Lily's late-night call, Walter's timing, the missing documents, the forged signature. It was all starting to connect. Walter was pulling the strings. Lily, with all her tech and her distance and her ambition, was the perfect channel. Smart enough to crack the ledger, innocent enough to be dismissed, young enough to think she was in control. But Gerald had seen it, long before she did. Eleanor paced the kitchen, one hand on her stomach. Nausea rolled in waves. What else had she missed? What else had been slipped beneath the surface while she was too busy trusting? The betrayal stung deeper than she expected. Walter hadn't just fooled her, he'd fooled Gerald. He'd fooled the government. He'd fooled everyone. And now he wanted the rest. The money, the land, her silence. She walked into the hallway and opened the closet where she kept her coat. The air inside smelled of cedar and dust and old winters. At the back of the closet was a wooden box, a keepsake Gerald had carved himself with the initials E+B burned into the lid. She hadn't opened it in years. Inside were scraps of his journals, military patches, his last will, copies of it, handwritten versions with margins filled with notes. And tucked in between an envelope she hadn't noticed before. Her name was on the front, just L. Inside was a page from his notebook, one of the ones he used in the garage when he tinkered with blueprints and equations and nonsense codes. But this wasn't nonsense. It was a chart, a diagram of a trust, at the top Barnes Family Reserve Fund. Below that, a line led to a series of coded entries, legal names, account transfers, and something labeled Trustee Shadow. The name Walter H. Behrens appeared in a side note. Next to it, in Gerald's handwriting, underlined twice, "Do not activate unless dead." Eleanor pressed a hand to her chest. She took the envelope, folded it carefully, and returned to the kitchen. She poured herself a glass of water, her hands steady now. The facts were cold and precise. Gerald had created a backup plan, something complex enough to hide from everyone, but not from Walter. And at some point, maybe after the ledger was created, maybe before Walter had maneuvered himself into a place of trust, a place of control, Gerald had tried to warn her, tried to make it right, and now it was her turn. But she couldn't confront him, not yet, not without proof, not without knowing how far his reach extended. She didn't know who else he had in his pocket. Local lawyers, bank officials, online brokers. So instead, Eleanor sat down and made a plan. She began by removing the remaining physical documents from the green metal box and photographing each one. Then she mailed those images, not mailed to her friend Margie, who lived in northern Michigan and worked as a part-time paralegal for a retired judge. No explanation, just a note. If anything happens to me, bring this to the sheriff's office. Ask for Chief Weber. Tell him the Walter issue has resurfaced. He'll know what it means. E.B. Next, she called Carl Wetzel, her town attorney. I need a full revocation of power of attorney, she said firmly. Effective immediately. He didn't ask why. He just said it'll be ready by noon. She spent the rest of the afternoon printing documents, digging through Gerald's notes, scanning what she could and storing the originals in a hollowed-out section of the wall behind the laundry machine. It wasn't Fort Knox, but she doubted even Walter knew about that spot. Gerald had installed it himself in 1993 and never spoke of it again. By sunset, Eleanor was exhausted but focused. She hadn't cried, not once. She wasn't angry, not in the screaming, glass-shattering way. She was calm, sharp, prepared. She looked out the window at the fields turning gold with twilight and felt something shift inside her, something she hadn't felt in years. Resolve. For 15 years she had lived quietly, softly, always 2 steps behind everyone else. But now, with every lie unraveling, she felt the weight of her husband's voice rising in her chest. Don't let them use it to trap you. She wouldn't. She'd let them believe the trap was working, and then she'd set her own. Eleanor didn't sleep that night, not out of fear, but strategy. The light in Lily's guest room stayed on long after midnight, flickering blue through the crack under the door. Eleanor waited in the dark of her bedroom, counting the minutes between footsteps. At 2:27 a.m., she heard the soft creak of the floorboards near the back door, a faint jingle of keys, then silence. That was her moment. She slipped out of bed, barefoot and steady, and moved toward Lily's room. The door was unlocked. Her heart thudded as she stepped inside. The laptop sat open on the desk, glowing faintly. A text window blinked, still active. Eleanor moved closer, one hand shaking slightly as she touched the trackpad. The desktop was cluttered with files, folders labeled Trust Conversion Barnes Ledger and Walter LLC Docs. She clicked one. It opened to a bank portal, encrypted but unlocked. A transaction list filled the screen. Transfer number 012, $45,000 to Walter & Co. LLC. Transfer number 013, $15,000 to Walter & Co. LLC. Transfer number 004, $7,300 to private account alias Windvale. Transfer number 0015, $88,900 pending. Eleanor's stomach turned. She clicked into the account profile. It was registered under Lily's name, but the secondary authority listed was Walter Barron's. Co-signatory, beneficiary. The proof hit her like cold wind off the lake. She took photos of everything screen by screen, her old flip phone trembling in her grip, but holding steady enough to catch every detail. Then she backed out and tiptoed back to her room. By morning, Lily returned home yawning, holding an overpriced coffee in one hand and a plastic bag of croissants in the other. "Didn't want you to skip breakfast," she said, breezing past the hallway like nothing had happened. Eleanor waited until Lily had showered and changed before asking her to sit. "I need you to tell me the truth," she said simply. Lily blinked. "What are you talking about?" Eleanor reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Printed photos, screenshots, transaction details. Lily's eyes flicked over the images and she froze. "I saw the transfers," Eleanor said, her voice like flint. "To Walter & Co. LLC. The emails, the documents, the signature lines. I know you've been moving my money." Lily's lips parted. For a moment she didn't speak. Then she said almost mechanically, I was following Walter's instructions. He said it was to protect you. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Protect me? Lily leaned forward, her voice cracking. He told me Grandpa's money was technically illegal, that it came from military sources off the books, that if it was traced back to you, the government could seize everything. He said you'd be investigated, that you could lose the house, the land, even your benefits. Eleanor stared. Walter said we needed to move the money fast, bury it in corporate assets, that if we cleaned it, then you'd be safe. And maybe, Lily paused, her hands trembling, maybe I could help manage it, help you keep it secure. Eleanor let the silence hang. Lily looked up with glossy eyes. I swear, Gran, I thought I was helping you. He said the bank wouldn't honor anything unless it came through legal channels, that the ledger alone wasn't enough. You wired nearly $200,000 to a man who doesn't even own a mailbox, Eleanor said coldly. You forged my signature. You let him into my home. Lily's face broke. I didn't know. Not at first. I didn't realize he was using me until I saw the final transfer list. He cut me out of the last one, said I was too emotional, too slow. Eleanor folded her arms. And the forged deed. Lily looked down. He said we needed a clean title to protect the trust. By lying. I didn't think. Her voice cracked. I just wanted to help. I didn't think he'd God I didn't know. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then Lily stood and paced the room like a trapped animal. He tricked me, Gran. He made it sound like we were protecting a legacy, not stealing it. You're not innocent, Lily. I know, Lily whispered, but I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't. Not like this. Eleanor studied her. The trembling fingers, the flushed face, the cracked armor of control. Finally, Eleanor said, then help me fix it. Lily looked up. Help me bring him down. There was a long pause. Then Lily nodded, tears now freely falling. Yes, she whispered. Yes, whatever it takes. Eleanor stood slowly. Good, she said, because I'm not going into this fight alone. The morning sky over Wisconsin was a dull sheet of gray blank and waiting. Eleanor stood at the edge of her driveway, gloved hands wrapped around a thermos of weak coffee, eyes locked on the horizon. The air was biting, cold enough to stiffen her knuckles, but she didn't feel it. Not anymore. Behind her, Lily sat in the car, the engine humming low. She wore a black hoodie, face pale, jaw tight. On her phone, she tapped a button and nodded to Eleanor through the windshield. The recording app was running. Cloud backup enabled. AutoStream linked to an encrypted folder titled Truth Walter Final. They had prepared all night. Eleanor got in the car. Neither of them spoke as they drove the 6 miles of back road through patchy woods and sleeping cornfields where the trees stood brittle and the barns looked hollowed out by time. Walter's house came into view, white siding American flag half-folded, the same green pickup parked crooked in the driveway. It looked like any other winter day, but Eleanor knew better. Inside those walls was a man who had played her like a song. They parked without killing the engine. Eleanor stepped out first. Walter opened the door before she even knocked. Well, look who it is, he said, smoothly smiling with that same lopsided charm he'd worn for 40 years. Didn't expect you back so soon, Elle. She looked him in the eye. We need to talk. His gaze flicked to Lily behind her. He hesitated just a second too long. Then he stepped back. Of course. Come on in. The house was warm. Too warm. The air smelled of pine cleaner and something baking, something sweet like banana bread. Eleanor's stomach turned. Walter motioned them toward the living room. You want tea? I just made some. No, Eleanor said. Her voice was low, flat. We'll keep this short. Walter chuckled, settling into his recliner. That's never been your style, Elle. You've always been the long-suffering type. I know everything she said. The forged signatures, the trust scheme, the LLC accounts under Lily's name, the withdrawals, the betrayal. Walter's smile didn't even flicker. He leaned back, crossing one leg over the other. I figured you'd get there eventually. You always were sharper than you let on. Lily spoke up, voice shaking. You said it was for Gran's protection, that the money needed to be cleaned, that the army would come after her. Walter looked at her like a disappointed uncle. And you believed me. Still green, huh? He turned back to Eleanor. So, what now? You're going to return everything. Every cent, Eleanor said. And you're going to do it before I bring the law down on your head. Walter laughed. A deep, slow sound. Oh, Elle, that's adorable. I'm not bluffing. Oh, I know you're not. That's what I like about you. He stood, walked slowly to the fireplace, and stared at a photo on the mantel, Gerald and Eleanor from decades ago. He picked it up, ran his finger across the glass. You know I loved you, right? He said. Eleanor's breath caught. Walter didn't look back. I was there when Gerald met you. I watched him take everything. Your hand, your heart, your future. I sat in the background like the loyal soldier waiting, hoping. He turned. But he didn't deserve you, and deep down I think you knew that. Eleanor stiffened. Walter stepped closer. So when Gerald came to me with that asset plan, I saw my chance. Maybe not then, but eventually. I watched him bury money he didn't understand. I watched you grow older, lonelier. And I thought, why not me? You lied to me for decades, Eleanor said, voice raw. I protected you, he snapped. You think this town cares about you, about Gerald's secrets. I kept everything quiet. You used me. Walter's voice dropped. I claimed you, and what's more, I earned it. There was a silence, thick and humming. Then he walked to a desk drawer and opened it slowly. From inside, he pulled out a thick folder and something else. Something cold and black and unmistakable. A pistol. Lily froze. Eleanor didn't move. Walter held it casually, resting the barrel against the folder. You think you can threaten me? After everything I've done to cover your husband's mess. If you shoot us, Eleanor said softly, you lose everything. I lose nothing, Walter said, smiling, because I already transferred the remainder, the deeds, the accounts, the assets. You're too late. Lily's hands trembling tapped a second button on her phone from her jacket pocket. The red light flickered. Live stream initiated. We're not too late, she whispered. Walter didn't hear her. He stepped forward, placing the folder on the coffee table. This folder contains every trace of the Barnes Trust. You burn this and it all disappears. IRS won't find it. No judge will take it seriously. And you'll be another sad old woman screaming about ghosts and war and betrayal. He picked up the lighter beside the table, but he didn't get to flick it, because just then outside a siren wailed. Walter froze. Lily's phone buzzed. Eleanor turned. Police lights flooded the living room window. Walter whipped around. What did you do? Lily stood. You're not the only one who knows how to use the cloud, she said. 3 loud knocks shook the door. Mr. Walter Behrens. This is the Dane County Sheriff's Department. Step outside with your hands where we can see them. Walter's face contorted shock, then rage, then a flash of something else. He looked at Eleanor. You did this. She looked him square in the eye. No, we did. Walter raised the gun, but he never got the chance to aim. The front door burst open. Officers stormed in. The room exploded in shouts and commands. Drop the weapon. Walter didn't move fast enough. A beanbag round knocked him against the wall. The pistol slid across the floor. Within seconds he was pinned face down, hands behind his back, screaming about betrayal, about Gerald, about what was rightfully his. Eleanor stood still as stone. Lily exhaled so hard it came out as a sob. They cuffed Walter and dragged him toward the door. He passed Eleanor on the way out, eyes burning with fury. I loved you, he hissed. She didn't flinch. You loved control, she said, and now you've lost both. The door slammed shut behind them. The sirens faded, and for the first time in a very long time, silence, but not the lonely kind. This one was peace. The courtroom smelled like old paper and polished wood, dry, indifferent. A place designed to break everything down to facts and statutes and pages in triplicate. Walter sat in the defendant's chair, wearing a beige prison jumpsuit, wrists cuffed in front of him, eyes hollow but still flickering with remnants of the arrogant certainty that had once ruled every room he walked into. It was gone now, but it hadn't died quietly. The charges came like waves. Fraud, conspiracy, forgery, wire fraud, use of a deadly weapon during commission of a felony, unauthorized access to protected personal data, identity theft across state lines. The U.S. Attorney's Office didn't pull punches. This wasn't just a local betrayal, it was a federal crime. The live stream Lily had triggered had captured everything: his confession. The threats, the forged documents spread across the table like cards in a losing hand. And most damning of all, the words he'd said about loving Eleanor, about taking back what was his. The courtroom went silent when the audio played. When it was Lily's turn, the energy shifted. She stood at the witness stand, fingers tight around her sweater cuffs, voice steady but fragile. She answered every question. She admitted what she'd done. She admitted who she trusted. She admitted why. She didn't cry until they played the final bank transaction record, the one she'd authorized at 2:47 a.m. under Walter's pressure. Her voice cracked. "I thought I was protecting my grandmother. I thought I was fixing something broken. I didn't know I was being used to dismantle everything." The judge, a stern woman with wire-framed glasses and a sharp gaze, didn't raise her voice once. But when the verdict came down, it came down hard. Walter guilty on all counts. Sentence pending federal review. Likely 18 to 25 years. No bail. No parole. Lily. No criminal charges, but placed under financial conservatorship for 5 years. Limited access to funds, required restitution through community service, and mandatory financial ethics training. Probationary oversight. The courtroom emptied slowly. Eleanor sat alone on the bench, hands folded in her lap. She didn't look at Walter as he was led away. She didn't look at Lily as she was dismissed. She just stared at the floor like there might still be one more secret hidden in the grain of the wood. In the weeks that followed, her name was everywhere. Wisconsin widow. Outsmarts decades-long financial scam. Grandmother exposes Cold War-era fraud ring in her own backyard. From knitting to counterintelligence. The unexpected heroism of Eleanor Barnes. Reporters knocked on her door at all hours. Producers called her landline asking about book rights, film options, podcast interviews. Strangers mailed her handwritten letters, some full of admiration, others heavy with judgment. "You must feel vindicated," one local reporter said as he chased her down the front path with a notepad. Eleanor didn't answer, because she didn't feel vindicated. She felt tired and cold and quietly bruised in a way no article could describe. The money was back. The land was restored. The documents refiled. Every legal knot Walter had tried to tie was undone, one careful tug at a time, by federal agents and sharp-eyed lawyers. But the other things, the things that couldn't be counted or appraised, those were different. Walter had taken something else. So had Lily. Her sense of sanctuary, her peace in her own home, her faith in the idea that time built loyalty, that if you loved someone long enough, they became safe. She sat on the porch every evening with a mug of tea and watched the birds disappear into the trees as dusk crept in. Sometimes Lily came by. She never stayed long. She brought groceries, checked in, tried in small ways to show she still cared. Eleanor didn't stop her, but the space between them now felt like it belonged to someone else, like it had Walter's fingerprints all over it. She didn't hate her granddaughter, but she didn't trust her either. Not yet. One chilly morning, Eleanor drove alone to the lake house, now legally hers again, its title clean, its walls still echoing with silence. She stood under the same oak tree where Gerald had buried the green box and stared at the soil. There were no more secrets here, no more maps, just memory, and the question that had started growing quietly in the back of her mind since the courtroom closed. If I have everything back, why does it still feel like something's missing? She walked down to the edge of the lake and sat on the old bench Gerald had built out of reclaimed barnwood. The same one they used to sit on during summer nights with lemonade and jazz music crackling from the radio inside. The wind moved gently across the water. The ice hadn't fully melted yet. Ducks drifted near the far bank. She thought of Walter, not with anger, but with clarity. She thought of the look in his eyes when they cuffed him. It wasn't regret, it wasn't even fear. It was disappointment. He'd spent his entire life believing he was owed something, and in the end he died before dying. His idea of love twisted into conquest, his idea of family warped into leverage. And Lily, Eleanor didn't know what Lily would become now. Maybe someone stronger, maybe someone softer, maybe both. But Eleanor understood one thing clearly. Trust wasn't something you gave once. It was something people earned day after day through silence, through storms, through the spaces in between. Gerald had known that. That's why he'd buried the map, not the treasure. The treasure had always been trust. And now she had to ask herself honestly, quietly, could it ever come back? Could it grow again like spring from frost? Maybe, but only if she stopped looking backward, only if she chose to start again. Slowly, one day at a time. The letterhead was simple, no logos, no grand statements, just her name in black ink and her signature at the bottom. Eleanor folded it once, slipped it into a plain envelope, and addressed it to the Midwest Women's Support and Advocacy Center. A second letter, identical in tone but shorter, was addressed to the Wisconsin Digital Learning Initiative. She placed both into her mailbox before sunrise raised the red flag and returned inside without fanfare. By noon the story would break, but she wouldn't be answering calls this time. She had written it plainly, I no longer want the money. I want it to become freedom for someone else. All 683s, 412.14. Every cent of what Gerald had hidden, every inheritance, every interest gain, every acre of lakeside land was being transferred to help elderly women like her, widowed, forgotten, manipulated, discarded. Women who still had years left in them and no one telling them they mattered. The rest would go toward funding a series of free classes in digital literacy, especially for older women. Eleanor had seen firsthand what tech ignorance could cost someone. No one would use a login or a document signature to rob someone again if she could help it. And she could, because she had finally learned survival wasn't about keeping what was yours. It was about knowing when to give it away. The announcement spread like wind across dry grass. Headlines bloomed. Talk shows asked, why would she give it all up? Panels debated if she was being manipulated again. Some called it trauma response. Others called it sainthood. Eleanor didn't respond. Not to the calls, not to the knocks on her door, not even to the local news anchor who showed up with flowers and a cameraman. She just smiled politely and handed him a one-line statement on a post-it note. I'm doing what Gerald never could. I'm letting go. Lily visited 2 days later, holding her phone in one hand and a small notebook in the other. I read about the donation, she said. They're already drafting the legal transfers. Eleanor nodded. I want to help, Lily added, if you'll let me. Eleanor poured 2 cups of tea before speaking. How? Lily sat. The digital classes. I've already started writing the curriculum. I talked to the director of the center. She said they've been waiting for a reason to launch something like this. I can teach 3 nights a week. We'll start with basic security passwords, phishing, online banking. Her voice steadied. Let me teach them what I didn't know, what I should have known. Eleanor stirred her tea, watching the spiral of honey in the cup. I don't need redemption stories, she said softly. I'm not writing one, Lily answered. I want to be useful again. I want to stand somewhere that doesn't hurt anyone. Eleanor looked at her, really looked. This wasn't the same girl who had arrived with a laptop and empty reassurances. This was someone stripped down to the truth, raw, humble, still flawed, but learning. Then do it, Eleanor said, but not for me, not for guilt. Lily nodded. I know. Before she left, Lily reached into her bag and handed Eleanor a set of watercolors pastels unused in a metal tin. I remembered what you said, she whispered, about painting. I thought maybe you'd want to start again. Eleanor took the box gently. It felt heavier than it should have, like a door she hadn't touched in years now creaking open. Thank you, she said, and meant it. 2 weeks later, Eleanor moved out. She didn't sell the house. She donated it to the local land trust, requesting it be turned into transitional housing for women over 60 experiencing homelessness. She took only what she needed, her books, her sketch pads, her old record player, and one of Gerald's army coats that still smelled faintly of cedar. She rented a small 1-bedroom apartment just 3 blocks from the public library. Nothing fancy, but close enough to walk, close enough to breathe. Every morning she visited the library, picked a window seat and sketched. Not portraits, not still lifes. She painted keys, hundreds of them. Old keys, ornate keys, skeleton keys, house keys. Some floated above hands. Others hung from invisible strings. One rested at the center of a blooming flower. To her, they weren't keys to places. They were keys to truths, to doors people didn't know they could open, to stories locked in silence, to lives paused for too long by fear. One Friday afternoon, as she painted a brass key resting on a cracked teacup, a librarian named Jonah approached. He pointed to her sketch pad. That's yours, she nodded. It's beautiful, he said. You know the gallery next door is hosting a community showcase next month. You should think about submitting. Eleanor looked at the page, and for the first time in over 50 years she said something she hadn't dared speak aloud. I'm not afraid of showing people what I make anymore. Jonah smiled. Then show them. At 74, Eleanor Barnes finally stopped waiting. She stopped waiting for the world to be fair. She stopped waiting for people to explain themselves. She stopped waiting to feel whole through someone else's apology. She wasn't healed, not entirely, but she was free. And for the first time in decades, that was enough. They called it the Eleanor Project, a name Lily hadn't suggested, but one the board unanimously insisted on. The classroom wasn't much to look at first. A converted church basement with water-stained ceiling tiles, a few second-hand laptops donated by local businesses, and folding chairs that creaked like tired bones. But it was a start. On the first day of class, Lily stood before 8 kids from low-income neighborhoods, some barely old enough to hold a mouse correctly. Some had never opened a computer before, but all of them watched her like she had something magical in her hands. She did. It was knowledge, and this time she wielded it with a kind of reverence. Eleanor sat in the back that day, unannounced, silent as a statue. She watched Lily teach them how to set up secure passwords, how to spot fake links, how to protect their identities online. Lily didn't see her until the final slide of the session one that simply said, "You deserve to know how the world works." Their eyes met. No words passed between them, but something settled. Something long unspoken finally acknowledged. Every Sunday afternoon they met without fail. Sometimes they brought muffins, sometimes just tea. Sometimes they arrived in silence, both tired from their weeks, but always glad to see each other. In the small plot of soil behind the apartment building, Eleanor planted carrots and mint. Lily helped her build trellises for peas and tomatoes. Neither of them had green thumbs, but they learned, together. When they weren't gardening, they visited the local elder care center. It had started with just one visit, Lily's idea awkward and uncertain. But the moment Eleanor sat down with an old man named Rufus and read aloud from The Old Man and the Sea, something in her softened. She hadn't read to someone since Gerald lost his hearing in one ear. It felt like speaking into a quiet world again, so they kept coming back. And slowly others joined them. A retired pianist named June brought sheet music. A pair of teenage boys from Lily's coding class began fixing old tablets for the residents. The center began calling the Sunday group the Thaw, because that's what it felt like, ice breaking, old silences melting. One afternoon, as they were packing up the garden tools, a girl from the tech class ran across the street waving her phone. "It's in," she yelled. Lily raised an eyebrow. "What is—" "The exhibit Miss Eleanor got selected." Eleanor blinked. "What exhibit?" The girl held up the email. The Winchester Regional Gallery of Modern Folk Art had accepted Eleanor's painting The Rug, a mixed-media piece built with layers of painted burlap stitching and acrylic oils. She had submitted it on a dare from Jonah the librarian and immediately forgotten about it. The gallery had not. The curators called it a masterclass in intergenerational storytelling, one woman torn between inherited betrayal and chosen renewal. When the exhibit opened, The Rug was placed at the center of the gallery. It depicted a woman seated at the edge of a fraying rug. On one side of her shadows, shaped like men in uniform, banknotes fire and a clock with no hands. On the other, wildflowers, open books, small hands reaching upward, and a cracked window letting in light. In her lap, a needle and thread. Mending, choosing. People didn't come to see the money anymore. They came to see the woman. They came to ask her how to forgive. They came to listen when she spoke about grief that arrives in disguise, about betrayal, that doesn't always come with a villain's face, about strength not as muscle but as mercy. One evening at a panel discussion at the gallery, a young woman stood during the Q&A. "My mother hurt me," she said. "Not like physically, but in a way that changed who I am. And I don't know how to come back from that. I don't know how to look at her without remembering." Eleanor's reply was simple. "You don't have to forget," she said. "You just have to decide what else gets to live in the room with that memory." She never went back to the lake house. But once she passed by it in Lily's car as they drove home from a talk. The porch light was off, the trees taller, the bench still there. She didn't ask to stop. Instead, she looked ahead, at the road, at Lily, and she smiled. Because forgiveness wasn't a destination. It was a rhythm, a choice made quietly again and again until it stopped hurting and started becoming home. The wood of the bench was smooth beneath Eleanor's hands, worn down by years of weather and waiting. It had once held her and Gerald on quiet afternoons when their world still made sense. Later it held secrets and codes and grief she hadn't yet named. Now it simply held her. No ghosts, no shadows, just the weight of her own body solid and calm. Children's laughter floated across the lake. Lily's students, some from the tech program, others just neighborhood kids from the Sunday sessions, sat on the grass nearby with library books opened in their laps, reading aloud in unsure voices. A boy named Theo struggled with a chapter from Charlotte's Web, but he didn't give up. And when he finished the sentence, the others clapped. Eleanor smiled, turning the page in her own book. She wasn't reading it. She just liked the feel of it in her lap. She looked out across the water. The lake shimmered under the late afternoon sun, and the tree line on the far side leaned gently as if listening. The great oak that once hid Gerald's secrets had lost another limb in the last storm. Nature never asked permission to let go. She inhaled deeply, let the air fill her lungs, and whispered, "It's a good day." Lily approached from behind, holding 2 lemonades. "You still like it sweet?" she asked. "I'm still alive, aren't I?" Eleanor grinned. They sat together in silence. "I've been thinking about what you said," Lily said after a while, "about not needing redemption." Eleanor glanced at her. "I don't want to be forgiven because I apologized," Lily continued. "I want to be forgiven because I finally understand the damage." Eleanor didn't respond immediately. Instead, she nodded toward the kids on the grass. "That's your apology," she said softly. "And your answer." Lily followed her gaze and swallowed hard. After a moment, Eleanor looked down at her hands, veined and weathered, but still steady. "You know what's strange," she said. "I spent so much of my life trying to hold on, to Gerald's legacy, to memories, to what I thought safety looked like. But I only started living when I gave it all away." Lily blinked at her. Eleanor turned toward the lake again. "I thought that money was the map, the answer to something Gerald left behind. But it was just the key. The real treasure was the freedom to choose something else." She looked directly at Lily, to rewrite the ending. A silence passed between them, but it was no longer the silence of pain or confusion. It was the kind you settle into when nothing is chasing you anymore. Then Eleanor spoke, her voice low but unwavering. "The greatest wealth isn't what we keep. It's our capacity to forgive others, yes, but especially ourselves." A gust of wind swept across the water, catching the pages of the book scattered in the children's laps, lifting a few loose leaves from the grass. One of the little girls looked up at Eleanor. "Miss Eleanor, can we read Anne of Green Gables next week?" "You absolutely can," Eleanor said with a warm chuckle. "But only if you read it out loud with proper voices." The girl nodded seriously. The light softened golden, now stretching across the lake, falling on the bench, on Eleanor's hands, on Lily's face. Lily reached out gently, took Eleanor's hand in hers. They didn't look at each other. They didn't need to. The world didn't stop. It didn't rewind. But for a moment it paused just long enough for healing to breathe.